Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see you all. I know that some of you we may still have people jumping on. So we are going to start in a meditation that will be led by Christine today. Christine's joining us to cover the first half of today's lesson, which is week 4. We are covering mindfulness of the body. And in today's session, we'll be talking about mindful eating and how we could use this as not only an informal practice, but how it develops us in a formal practice also. And then we'll be introducing the concept of working with the elements inside of the body. We'll also cover some more tips on walking meditation, and I'll introduce another breathing practice that is another means of these internal resources that we're building to lean into when we need them. So welcome to week 4. It's great to see all of you, Group B. I'm going to hand it over to Christine.
Hi, everybody. Jen, can you hear me?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, I could hear you well.
Great. So yes, welcome to week 4. And some referred to as the muddy middle, where we start to notice things about our formal practice that takes us into deeper feelings, and things might start coming up, and we'll really start to address those things in our next lesson, mindfulness of feelings. But if things are coming up during your formal practice, just sort of notice them, note them, and don't judge them, and move forward, resume, come back in, and do so with a spirit of great kindness. The other thing that you might notice as you go deeper into these practices is that the benefits of your formal practice start to spill over into other aspects of your everyday life. And you're also going to notice that as we continue to work with you, we will be encouraging you to start bringing a sense of mindfulness to very mundane activities, such as eating. So when you think about it, we need to eat in order to survive, and we need to eat to thrive, and we eat several times per day. So eating is a wonderful opportunity for us to bring mindfulness and our practices into the act of eating and into our relationship with food. When I was preparing for this module, I started thinking about one of the most beautiful periods of time in my life. I was in graduate school, and I had 2 roommates who were from Portugal. They were neuroscientists. They were studying to be doctors of neuroscience. And so they were really busy. They were teaching, they were researching, they were spending a lot of time in the lab, they were taking classes, but I was struck by the fact that they organized their schedule so that they could be home. We shared a house together. They could be home at 4 p.m. and then again around 7:30, 8 p.m. And I was very curious about that. What goes on at 4 p.m.? And they used to say, it is at 4 p.m. that we take in our coffee and our bread. And I was very struck by those words, take in. We take in our coffee and our bread. They didn't use the word eat. We take it in. And I started to join them in that ritual, and I got to understand what they meant by taking in their coffee and their bread, which was really an act of nurturing and nourishing themselves in the course of a busy day. They were taking a very intentional pause around eating and the ritual of taking in food. And it was a beautiful period of time where we would gather, and they had the most delicious bread, which they would slice and they would warm, and they would slather with butter, not margarine, nothing low fat, no fat, real butter, and these really beautiful jams that they would have sent to them from their country. And then they would also go through the ritual of making beautiful coffee, with the French press. And we would sit and we would enjoy and we would just talk a little bit, but mostly we were engaged in this really beautiful extended pause where we were taking in the nurturing and the nourishment of our bread and our coffee. And we did something very similar toward the end of the day around 8 p.m. when they would come home and they would cook on the stove. And they always made delicious meats and vegetables, and everything was warm and everything was accompanied by wine. And the other thing I noticed about the way they ate is as they took a spoonful or a forkful of food, they always put the fork down after every bite. They did not hold the fork throughout the meal. They just kept returning to it. So it was this very slow, pause-like, intentional kind of eating, and just a really beautiful appreciation and relationship to food. So I want you to start thinking about, or we encourage you to start thinking about, the ways in which you might bring a sense of mindfulness to what you take in, taking in your coffee, taking in your tea, taking in your wine, taking in your water, taking in your food. So I want to launch us into a guided meditation, and I'm just going to have us move through it, and then I'll talk a little bit about the various aspects of this meditation so that you can start using versions of it at home. I'm actually going to be demonstrating mindful eating with this little precious clementine. I can't believe how small it is. It's actually very sweet just looking at it and holding it. So I'll be demonstrating, but when we get to the part where I'm demonstrating with the clementine, feel free to keep your eyes closed if you want to just sort of enjoy the meditation from that point of view. If not, you can certainly open your eyes and watch. But otherwise, we are going to begin, if you're comfortable, taking our seat. And if you're comfortable, closing your eyes or just keeping your gaze very soft. You may feel that the feet are touching lightly against the floor, about hip width apart. And we just take a moment to lengthen through the spine so that the spine feels tall and dignified. You just take the shoulders down and back. Coming into this state where we feel grounded through the feet, centered through the spine, and spacious through the heart and the chest. Allowing the breath to just be exactly as it is. And you may notice that the mind is starting to settle and calm a little bit. And so in a quiet space in the mind, you might bring to mind an image of a beautiful plate of food. And as you listen to these words, just continue to keep the focus on that image and the sense of gratitude and preciousness that our food grants us. I am grateful that I have the privilege to have this food before me. I'm grateful for the nurturing earth from which this food was birthed. for the sun, the rain, the soil, the terrain, from which the elements of this food grew. I am grateful for the hands that harvested it, transported it, prepared it, the hands that brought it here to me now. I am grateful for all the ways that this food will nourish and sustain me, energize, heal me, delight, and fascinate me. And I hold the sincerest wish that all beings will come to be nourished in this way, just as I am, here and now. The five senses are part of the body and part of the bodily experience. We're going to take the five senses as points of focus, as anchors, as we begin to mindfully approach the clementine. And it is here that you can open your eyes if you'd like, or just keep them closed. It's up to you. But I begin with my sense of sight. Looking carefully at the clementine, noticing the various shades of orange in its skin, noticing its scars and bruises, noticing that it's not perfectly round, but it's perfect in its imperfection, just like we are. And moving to my sense of touch, I'm aware of the way the skin feels, how there are places where it is warm and places where it is cool. I am aware of its size. I am aware that the skin is not smooth, but dimpled. I'm aware of its weight, how light it feels, yet how dense at its center. Bringing it to my nose, I inhale its scent, and I can experience the subtleness of the sweetness that lies within. Continuing to focus on touch and how touch feels different as I begin to peel the clementine. How touch feels different as the juices begin to immediately flow out and into my hands, noticing how the skin is different. As I've broken into it and encounter the white flesh on the inside of its skin. I notice how the aroma has changed. It's much stronger, much sweeter. using my sense of hearing, I can hear the sound of pulling the skin back. Something I've never heard before, noticed before. Pulling it apart at its center. I notice its veins. I notice the intricacy of this simple tangerine. Taking it to my mouth, I notice its texture. As I begin to chew, I notice its juices. I notice that it tastes differently from the moment I placed it in my mouth to the moment of swallowing. I notice the sensation of taste is different on my tongue than it is as it presses against my cheek. Sight, touch, smell, taste, sound. All aspects of this mindful approach to the clementine. And just taking a final moment to focus on the fruit with the knowledge that I hold in my hand so many aspects of the universe: the sun, the rain, the soil, the sky. All the hands, my hand, that brought it here. And I am grateful. Very gently guiding your awareness just back to the comfort and the experience of now. Whenever you're ready, open your eyes. Coming back into the light in your space. Couple of things that I want to point out about the flow of that meditation. We began with gratitude, and I read some words that I hoped would connect you to the gratitude that we can feel when we think about the journey that whatever it is we're taking in, the journey that it's taken to get in front of us in the first place. And it's a good practice because it takes us back to something that we learned in week 2, that idea of preciousness. And when I can focus on the preciousness of the cup of tea in front of me, or the preciousness of this clementine, preciousness almost immediately takes us into gratitude And what we learned about gratitude is that it's almost impossible for the human mind to hold thoughts of stress and overwhelm and negativity and gratitude at the same time. So if we can come in or shift into a state of gratitude, we can often shift out of overwhelm, stress, negativity in a way that's really profound and powerful. So when I approach a plate of food or a clementine or a cup of tea or whatever it is, with that sense of valuing its preciousness, I shift into gratitude, and then my experience of eating and my relationship to eating and my food becomes something very different. From that place, we moved into mindfully approaching the clementine through the five senses. I began with sight. What do I see? And I moved into touch. How does this feel? And then smell, the difference between smelling the outside of the clementine and how different it is when I open it up. The various nature of taste and how the eating of just one slice of the clementine is a very different experience in terms of taste and texture, depending on where it's landed in your mouth. And then finally, really tuning into sound. What is the sound of our eating? Not only the external sound, the sound I hear as I'm peeling away the outer skin and separating the slices, but even the sound that we hear when we're chewing. That's sort of all of the internal sound that occurs in the act of eating. So start to think about, again, how you might bring a sense of mindfulness to the things, remembering that term, I'm taking in my clementine, as a form of nourishing and nurturing. And then you can really begin to start using your practice during periods of time during the day when you're eating or drinking. We would love for you over the course of the next 2 weeks to take at least 3 to 5 of your meals mindfully. And you can do that alone. You can engage your family members in that. We also recommend that you do this without watching television, sitting down to take in your meal, not checking text messages or email while you're eating or reading while you're eating. And as Jen suggested at the beginning, if you can approach a meal like that, the meal itself can become a formal practice that can be quite powerful. So I hope you enjoyed this segment on mindful eating. Is there anything that you want to add, Jen?
No, you did a great job, Christine. Thank you so much. Okay, were you finished? Is there anything else you want to add before I move on?
I feel like I've forgotten something, but that's why I called you in.
Oh yeah, no, it was great. I feel like we'll talk a little bit more about mindful eating after we talk about the elements and how kind of we could weave these two practices together. So thank you, Christine.
Thank you.
Well, it's great to see all of you again. I just wanted to remind you that we're still working in a mindfulness of the body, and mindfulness of the body, of course, includes all of the practices over the past 4 weeks. So remember, the breath is cannot be separated from the body. We can turn our focus towards the breath, but sometimes the breath could be rather hard to connect to. And, especially I find, even after many, many years of practice and maintaining a daily practice, that, when my allergies or asthma is being really flared up, I was especially having trouble last week into this week with all of the weather changes, the weather being 80 degrees one day and then going down to the 40s. I was getting some headaches and tension my allergies were all over the place, and that tightness in my chest. And when these things come up, so we need to have other ways to drop in to this space of calm and peace where we feel really grounded in presence. And then we could kind of invite in this spaciousness to hold whatever we're noticing come up. And it could be especially, it could be especially alarming when we have a regular practice, we're used to dropping into the anchor of the breath, and all of a sudden that anchor feels difficult. So introducing the elements as another way to drop in to an anchor, using the elements of an anchor, making this available as a formal practice is just like adding another tool into your little bag, into your toolbox of these inner resources. So I wanted to start out by just mentioning a story of how I became really connected to the elements in this practice, which was, I felt somewhat disconnected to for a long time, became really important to me, more important to me. I think I've mentioned this to most of you before, but my grandmother passed away about 1.5 years ago, and it was a very difficult transition for me. I was her primary caretaker. So the months leading up to her passing, we were in and out of the hospital, and then ended up having to be in a nursing home environment for a little over 5 weeks. And then we had to transition her back to her home, and we had hospice care involved, and it was just extremely heavy, a very heavy time for me. Prior to all of this happening, my husband and I had planned a family vacation, and it was a big one. We were going to Hawaii, and so we had been planning it for well over 1 year, and it was something that we were really looking forward to. And it was a place that my grandmother had gone when I was a little girl, and was very special to her, and she was really excited for us before she got sick. So we kept our vacation, but it was 6 weeks after her death. And so I was still really feeling depleted. I was really dealing with a lot of heaviness and grief and just heartache. She had been a very big part of my life. So I found that my practices also I felt disconnected from my practices. My formal practices were interrupted during that time. And even though those formal practices were interrupted, I had never in my life felt more present than during her transition, because I just stayed so present with her and her needs, and just being with her, knowing that we didn't have very much time left. So I was really anxious to drop back into my own inner resources, because I knew that's what I needed. But every time I dropped into anchoring into my breath and my practices, I just would feel the heaviness of my heart, and I would just feel that heaviness, and felt like I couldn't breathe. It was making me anxious. So needless to say, when we got to Hawaii, I went out the first morning, and where better to practice meditation than on the beach in Hawaii? It doesn't get better than that. And I remember sitting into the warm sand, and once again noticing that I couldn't access my breath, because emotionally it was too difficult, and it felt too overwhelming, and I felt like I didn't have access there. So I dropped into the elements, and I'd worked with them before. And certainly I am an outdoors person. I love to go hiking. I love to be there's no better place for me than by a lake, and kayaking or canoeing or paddleboarding. I love the ocean, of course, but I just love being around nature. And so I knew that I had these tools and I could really access them. So I'd like to invite you into a practice now where I'll provide you with a visualization of sitting on a sandy, warm beach. And it can be a beach it could be the beach in Hawaii that I'm describing, or it could be a favorite spot of your own. So I'd like you to take a seat, whether you're sitting in a chair or with your knees crossed, or any comfortable seat on the floor. Just simply rest into your seat, dropping your weight down, closing your eyes, and taking a moment just to drop into your surroundings just as they are. So whether you're at home, whether you're at work, or somewhere else, just notice your body in your seat. Notice your feet against the floor, or any part of your body that's touching the floor, supported by the floor. Bring your attention into the breath just as it is. Notice any sounds of life happening around you. Opening up your sense of hearing and allowing any of those sounds just to be the backdrop for this practice today. And now I'd like you to visualize your body sitting on a warm, sandy beach. Imagine that warm sand against the skin. Imagine your feet or legs sinking into the sand. And imagine just dropping yourself into the earth herself, like the earth is holding you. And this earth energy, this element of earth, this solid foundation, see if you could bring the qualities of the earth inside for a moment and connect there. Notice how your bones feel heavy and grounded in your seat. And notice that the bones themselves are solid and dense. And that we could feel this earth element inside just as much as we could feel or imagine the earth beneath us, holding us here. And bring your attention to your breath for a moment, noticing the lightness and freedom and spaciousness of the wind energy or air energy surrounding that solid earth element inside. Coming back to the visualization, imagine the wind on a sandy beach moving around you, brushing against your skin, moving through your hair. You could even imagine the sound of the air, this wind element. How it feels against your eyelashes. Notice the qualities of the element of air. Notice the lightness there and freedom. And notice how the body itself breathes the air element in. With this quality of lightness and ease, this quality of freedom and spaciousness. And we can again return the attention down to the earth element inside, the support of your bones, the lightness of the air, how they work in harmony together. Earth and air, solid and light. Grounded and free. Returning to the visualization of sitting on that warm, sandy beach with the air brushing around you. Feel the heat of the sun against the skin. Warming the crown of the head. Holding you in that comfortable glow. And inviting that element inside, right to heart center, and noticing the heat of the heart, the heat and energy of the fire element residing in the heart center. And you can imagine the energy of the heart pumping blood through the system, nurturing every cell in the body. And the energy of the heart propelling us forward with passion and courage, inviting in new challenges, experiences with compassion and kindness. That warmth of the sun propelling us ahead, propelling us forward. And we also know that the fire element carries with it the passion of progress, which could also shift quickly into agitation or even anger, that fire. So let's turn to the water element to cool the fire of the heart and balance and harmonize the system. So imagine the ocean ahead of you, the waves crashing at your feet, the salt water washing us clean. Imagine the sounds of the ocean surrounding you, opening to your senses and inviting it in. Turning inside now to see the element of water inside. Bring your attention to the moisture inside your mouth and swallow it down into your belly. Notice the water element in every corner, in your fingertips and toes, and your belly and shoulders. The water element even in your ears, your knees and your hips. Every part of our system surrounded by water, washing us clean. Earth and air, fire and water, balancing each other out, inside and out. Notice what you feel most. Notice which element is harder to feel inside. Bring your attention back to your breath. And let's take 3 full deep breaths together. Inhaling deep. Exhale, releasing the breath. Inhale, fill. Exhale, release. And last full breath, inhale. And exhale, empty. Now bring your hands to your heart, your right hand on heart center, left hand over right. And just take a bow of the head. Open your eyes, inviting light back in and returning to our time together. So we could always drop into the 4 elements, and we could drop into those elements when we're just out for a walk in nature, just feeling our feet against the ground, opening our awareness into the fresh air surrounding us and moving in and out of us, right? Opening up to the heat or lack of heat in the atmosphere, the heat in our bodies as we're moving, and the water element, either surrounding us in nature or right here inside. And we talk a lot about interconnectedness, and the elements certainly do that, right? We see the elements surrounding us, and we can also recognize the qualities of the elements inside of us, because we're not so different from the earth herself. We're all carrying around the same elements inside, which makes us more connected to each other. And it also provides another way for the body to communicate. So we keep talking about that, this paying attention. Mindfulness is defined as moment-to-moment awareness. And when we drop in and pay attention or attend to the body right now, what is here? What's showing up? What did you notice most? Where did you feel most connected in that meditation? Where did you really feel the qualities of the earth? Did you really feel the qualities of fire? What didn't you feel? This paying attention gives us a lot of information, right? How about if we're working with pain, right? Some people are working with pain on a chronic level. And if you're only paying attention to the fire element when you're dealing with chronic pain, that fire could burn up all of your attention. If we're dealing with pain on a daily basis, how can we acknowledge the fire element inside and try to balance out that experience by attending to the element of water, the element of air, that element of spaciousness, creating a little more room for the pain to still be there because it may not go away, but we could change our relationship to it. It doesn't have to overwhelm the system. So what we're always looking for, what I'm always interested in you paying attention to, is what is overwhelming me right now? What am I noticing right now? And how can I attend to what I'm noticing in a way that I feel less overwhelmed and more balanced? Where do I feel more harmony? Because the system is always, always, always shifting in and out of balance, whether we're paying attention or not. But when we start paying attention and noticing and understanding how we could use these inner resources to help bring us back into a state of equanimity, then we're less at risk for that overwhelm or that space of disharmony to completely throw us into reactivity or toss us into a state of anxiety or move us into explosive anger. See, that I know I mentioned in the meditation, anger could be something that really propels us forward. It could motivate us to change things for better, right? So anger is not necessarily a negative thing. We don't have to always feel like we have to be reactive when we notice fire in the heart, right? Fire propelling us forward. See it as we could shift the vantage point and acknowledge that we're feeling emotionally fiery, but we could use that acknowledgement, that understanding for good, right? How could I cool down? And then how could I use this understanding of noticing what I'm experiencing to propel me forward so that I'm less able to slide into a space where things feel out of control. Okay? Do you guys have any questions on that before I move on? How we're using the elements. So there's always 4. These are 4 traditional elements. We could find all of the elements in nature depending on what culture or train of thought that you're looking at. Sometimes air will be called ether or wind. Wind is a very Tibetan phrase for air. Okay, so those are interchangeable. You may also see the wood element or the metal element included in other trains of thought. But for our purposes, we're working with very traditional Eastern elements, and we're working with the ground, that grounded solid quality of the earth. We could find that outside and in. That light, free, spacious quality of air, again, outside and in. That warm, compassionate, kind quality of the fire, but also that fiery, progressive kind of nature of fire as well. And then of course the water element. The water element I want to pause with for a moment because the water element is so important and intricately weaved into the health of the kidneys in Chinese medicine. So in Chinese medicine theories, the kidneys are essential to the health of the entire system. And not only physically, but emotionally and mentally. Okay? The kidneys are most susceptible to depletion when we are under enormous stress. So when we are dealing with high levels of stress, it's extremely important that you're attending to the health of the kidneys. And how can you do that? Well, you can take in more water, number one. You could make sure that you're drinking a lot of water, that you're getting appropriate amounts of rest, that you're really dropping into these daily practices and inner resources to balance out the kidneys. But there's also two other practices, micro practices, I wanted to introduce today. So the first one is a kidney massage. I'd like you to stand up. Okay, so I'm going to stand up. I'm going to look a little funny for a moment because my desk is lower than me. Okay, but in order for you to see me, I'd like you to take your hands and bring them to your back. So I'm going to bring the camera down for a second. And if you could feel your rib cage, so at the bottom of the ribs, you'll feel where the ribs kind of stop and they kind of drop in, and you'll feel a tender area there. I'd like you to make little fists with your hands, so both hands in fists. Take the fist to this kidney space, and I'd like you to massage the kidneys. So we're swirling the massage of the kidneys in, and you could kind of, I'm going to stop demonstrating and talk this through for a minute while you're doing this, okay? So you want to feel that tenderness, but it shouldn't feel sharp, and it should certainly not feel painful. So you just might feel or notice a little tenderness as you're massaging the kidney space. I'd like you to go a little faster with that now. So you might be going so fast that your arms will start feeling tired. That's how you know you're doing it good. Okay, so keep massaging the kidneys. And if you're at work and you're doing this at work, tell them they're really missing out. And now go the opposite direction. Okay, so change the direction. So you're still massaging the kidneys really fast as you could go. And you might lose that tenderness now. So you might feel warmth in the kidneys. Remember, water and heat help balance each other. So the kidneys are full of the water element. Now slow it down and just go a little deeper. Good. And now stop and relax. Close your eyes for a moment and just take a few deep breaths and imagine your inhale dropping down into this kidney space and the exhale correcting or releasing any imbalance there. So we're using a visualization of breath, bringing fresh energy down into the kidneys, the chi body correcting any imbalance there, and the exhale releasing that imbalance back out. Okay, so I'm asking you to try something different. What you might notice after this little kidney massage, and you could just do that for about 3 minutes, would be great. And it just kind of rejuvenates you. It almost feels like you had a little pop of caffeine. Okay? Remember, the kidneys are depleted by stress, and that will make us feel tired. It will also make us feel rather disconnected from ourselves. So if you ever describe yourself as, you know, if somebody asks how you are and you're like, oh, I just don't know how I feel, or I just feel disconnected or off. This is a call to attend to the kidneys. We want to make sure that we're always kind of tuned in or attuned to how we're feeling and how we're experiencing life, how we're approaching life, and how we're putting ourselves out there. So an I don't know response is a call to attend to the kidneys. Rest, water, and practice. Restorative practices like meditation, yin yoga, restorative yoga, a nice calm walk after work. Okay? And that is a good segue into the walking meditation practices. In our week 3 module, in the supportive material, I included walking meditation by one of my teachers, Jack Kornfield, a link to his website. And I also included on that a very detailed instruction from him on how to do a walking meditation. Now remember, there's 4 traditional postures for meditation practices. One that we've been working with most is seated meditation. The problem with seated meditation for all of you is that you're sitting so much during the day at work, right? You're sitting at your desk, you're sitting in front of your computer, you're sitting on your drive to work, you're sitting on your drive home after work, and you may need something besides a seated meditation, especially at the end of the day if you're trying to meditate in the evenings. So your options are to stand or to walk. The 4th option for meditation is to meditate laying down, which is wonderful, but it is quite an advanced practice, because what happens when we try to sometimes lay down and meditate? Well, we fall asleep, right? So it defeats the purpose. Sleeping is different, just as important as meditation, different than meditation. So if you're meditating to fall asleep, that does not replace your formal practice time. Remember, from a neuroscience perspective, these meditation practices are changing our brains physiologically. We're building gray matter, we're remapping unhealthy patterns, and we're increasing these neural pathways into the prefrontal cortex, getting out of the lizard brain, the lizard part of the brain, right? That fight or flight response. So we want to make sure that these formal practices, that the time we're spending are really effective and that are working really good. So the walking meditation, what I've mentioned up until this point is take a walk. Take a walk with your meditation buddy. If your meditation buddy has stopped practicing or stopped participating in this mindfulness initiative, grab them and take them for a mindful walk and introduce it to them and see if you could encourage them to drop back in, okay? So when we're walking mindfully as a formal practice, there's no speaking, there's no talking. Okay, we're walking in silence. We're not using music. We're paying attention to exactly what's happening. And we start by paying attention to your feet as each foot touches the ground, noticing the weight of your body distribute through your feet touching the ground, noticing how when the right foot, for instance, grounds and touches the earth and your weight shifts there, how the left foot feels lighter and the knee bends to propel the left foot forward, and watching that same thing happen on the other side. What I recommend for a formal meditation walking practice is to only take about 30 paces forward and then pause, breathe, turn around, and pace back for 30 more paces. You could set your timer for 7 minutes and make this your practice. Eventually, with practice, you'll be able to link your breath with the meditation, the paying attention of the feet walking. So inhaling the right foot up, dropping the heel down on the exhale, and grounding. Inhaling the left foot up, dropping the left heel down, grounding the toes. So you could see how that works. You could start working with your breath right away to see how that is for you. You could link your breath up in the way that feels most appropriate or comfortable for you. Okay, so you don't have to be rigid in these practices. You could be open to exploring and curious about how things are and how things are going. Remember, if you notice that critic part of yourself start like flaring up and saying, oh, you're not doing this right, this isn't what Jen said, blah, 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 right? Whatever the critic is saying, just calm the critic down. Say, okay, this is how it is right now. I'm going to give it a try and we'll see how it goes, right? So you could have these little conversations with yourself and just listen to my voice, that you could always start again. This is a practice. It's a daily practice that can support you, that has the potential to support you for the rest of your life. Okay, so you could practice these formal and informal internal resources forever, for the rest of your life. Okay, it doesn't mean you can't possibly do them wrong. You can't be bad at it. There's no striving, and I'm not going to test you. All I'm going to do is keep encouraging you and keep teaching you new things to give a try to. If you're really enjoying your seated meditation practice for 5 to 7 minutes, please anchor into that. Let that be your formal practice every day. And all of these new things that you're learning, we're learning a lot. These sessions are really full. So try not to get overwhelmed. You don't have to do all of these things. I just want you to have as many different options as possible when we're finished, because we are at the halfway point. So we only have 4 more sessions left together. All right, so please take advantage of us while we are here. We are here for you, to support you, and to help this be the most meaningful experience as possible. So with all of that being said, it's 2:01. So I know some of you need to run, drop off the call. I'm going to open this for questions right now. I'll unmute you. If you'd rather just chat in your questions, we could do that. So I'm here and available for any questions that you might have. Remember that I am also available via email. So Jennifer@meetyourcenter.com. You could email me at any time and I will get back to you. Okay, some of you have taken advantage of that, others have not. So please feel free to do that. So you're all unmuted now. And if there are any questions, I'm right here.
Okay, definitely client resolutions would be the best thing to do, is talk with them. You know, everyone has different things that can come about in their lives. And so I'll give you their number and I will get you connected.
I'm going to mute you guys again. And I know some of you are at work and are already digging in. So I applaud you for showing up today. Thank you for being a part of this, for taking advantage of this great opportunity. And I hope that you all have a lovely afternoon. Thank you very much.